Nutrient timing doesn't matter. Wait, what? Of course it does, right? It has to. And the real answer is, well, it depends. We're going to talk about nutrient timing for the 9 to 5 worker. This is the normal person that gets up, goes to their desk job. They have to fit in training before they go to their job, maybe on their lunch break, or maybe even really late at night. So when does nutrient timing matter for this individual? And we know there's a nutritional hierarchy that really is of importance. And so for one, we need a diet, number one, that is sustainable and you can stick to and be consistent with. Because all the things around nutrient timing or your total protein, it doesn't matter if you can't stick to it. So this is the number one important thing. From there, it's still all about your total calories, then protein, carbs, and fats, those macros. Then we get down to probably timing or even the food sources of importance. So remember, if you don't have the bottom tiers of this pyramid built out, the timing doesn't matter and is of far lesser importance. We also see this to be the case just around training, because after a training bout, you usually have protein synthesis that is elevated for 24 to 36 hours after you work out. So as long as you consume enough total protein within this window, you're fully covered for what you need from a muscle development perspective. Also, glycogen replenishment rates, so the rate at which you replace carbohydrate in the muscle you trained, is elevated for 24 hours as well. So as long as you're consuming enough carbohydrate within the window of 24 hours, you're completely covered for nutrient timing aspect. Another point is usually going into a training session, what about before, right? Well, it's kind of a rare instance where we're glycogen depleted outside of those that are maybe doing in prep or 2-a-day type of training. So really like having a ton of carbs before you go do a weight training session probably won't be a necessity. However, necessity and also optimality is another aspect around it. So we have some early on research looking at the real issue of seeing someone that has a meal or not a meal before training is actually just hunger signaling alone can decrease training performance. And we really want to make sure someone's hydrated, as just a decrease of 1 to 2% body weight in hydration can affect training performance, which is going to mean it's going to affect your stimulus for giving that drive to create muscle adaptations. And easily from nighttime to the morning, we can see a pretty large drop in body weight for someone getting a little bit dehydrated overnight. So these are the things to consider when looking at nutrient timing. Like big picture, we just need to make sure we consume enough total protein, carbohydrates, and fats for the day. Now, there are some instances in this kind of 9 to 5 worker where we might want to really think about timing nutrients. So what we do know is a narrow 1-hour window of post-training that's anabolic isn't necessarily the case. However, off the current literature, we know we should probably have some level of protein spacing throughout the day rather than just have one meal where we consume all the protein at once. And this looks like to be at least 4 up to 6 times per day of having these protein feedings. So if we spread that throughout, it looks like within a 3 to 5 hour window around your training window is kind of optimal timing protein. So we want a meal that kind of hits somewhere before you train, then 3 to 5 hours later, make sure you have a next meal. So we're gonna go through 5 scenarios of different type of 9 to 5 workers, or different even for those that are lifting at different times of day, of things to consider around timing. The first, we have the early morning lifter. This is the guy that has to get up early before because maybe he has family duties in the evening that he can't train then. Maybe he has to work late into the night that day and has to get up early. What should we consider? For one, we know training fasted probably isn't ideal, mainly from the hydration aspect, and we know that hunger signaling might decrease training performance. This also might be the person that has a hard time getting a lot of food in their stomach in the morning, could lead to nausea or maybe vomiting if they're doing an early leg day session. So number one, focus on hydration for this individual. We want to replace 1 to 2% body weight that was dropped overnight with water would be completely fine. Now, if we have someone that can't eat a lot in the morning, let's take advantage of intra-workout supplementation or pre-workout supplementation. This might using a carbohydrate powder or even like our juiced aminos from animal where you can get some essential amino acids in that won't sit extremely heavy on the stomach. You might even be able to do a liquid meal during this time, like we have animal meal, or even just using some whey protein along with maybe oat powder or even doing some light cream of rice, something that's gonna sit easy and digest quick. It's probably what you wanna do is limit fiber and limit high fats to where you don't slow down digestion, have that really sitting on someone's stomach heavy going into a training session. Now, this also could be something where you just drink your animal meal or whey during your session to have some amount of protein pre-training. Now, the thing is like, hey, John, I can't eat it all before I work out. What we see in the research of having someone, if they trained fasted and had a protein meal after training, or that same person that had a protein meal before training, is the fasted person actually just has a more robust response to protein synthesis having trained fasted. So even though you can't get something in, make sure timing's important to have something after to take advantage of that protein synthesis response you get from training. Our number 2 is our strict workday lifter. This is the individual that has a job where your boss is just drilling you and you're not allowed to leave your desk. Maybe you get time for lunch, but that lunch might span from 12 p.m. and you have to go train at 6 p.m. So you have this really large gap of not being able to eat. So what do? Well, for one, make sure you have a substantial lunch, which that might be high fiber, high fats, plenty of protein, carbohydrates, something that's gonna sit with you for a while over that time period. Now, hopefully your boss allows you to drink water, because there's no reason why you just couldn't also be drinking some type of shake during that time. Like I said before, we have animal meal, which is a balanced whole meal shake based around protein, carbs, and fats. Now, if that's still for some reason you're not allowed to do that, start your intra-workout supplementation as you're driving to the gym. So what I would do is have a large shaker mixed up that has carbohydrates in it, essential amino acids. So this might be 20 grams of essential amino acids. You start sipping that and allow that to move all the way into the gym, or you could even separate it. Have your like animal fury that you scooped in with your aminos and some carbs, and then finish that when you get to the gym. Do another scoop of aminos and carbs and let that sustain you during your training session. Our other scenario is the late night lifter. So this might be the person, hey, I work 9 to 5, I have to get home to the kids or family activities or whatever it may be. Then I go back to the gym, and the problem is I don't have a lot of time to eat before I get to bed. So we have an issue of just getting enough protein and carbohydrates and maybe still getting asleep, because it can be hard to eat a large meal and then go to bed right after. So in this instance, you might want to use just a whey shake post-training. This could even be like a whey casein blend. You could do some oat powder mixed into it, or maybe even cream of rice, something that is going to provide you some carbohydrates, but also not sit overly heavy, like having just a completely whole-based meal with lots of veggies and fats that are in it. So during that time, you might also be considerate to have something that is a little bit lower in fiber and fats. Now, if you do have some time to eat, you might want to go with some foods that are going to sit lighter. For one, mechanically broken down protein sources are much easier and faster digesting. So look at doing like ground chicken or ground turkey. Even fish would be fine during this time. And then carbohydrate sources that would be lower in fats. Maybe that's potato that's already been peeled. Or if you're in the off season and you still want some veggies, peas and corn, because they are a starch providing vegetable. So you can get in enough of those calories. Stick to using oils on top of your foods so they don't also have fiber contribution to make you overly full. And another thing to consider, hey, the peri-workout window, it's a time to double up. So if you could have your pre-workout meal, then during your training session, sip your post-workout shake there. So as long as you're consuming, again, enough protein and carbs around this training bout, you're gonna be fully covered. The fourth scenario is the bottomless pit lifter. This is the guy that just has so much food to consume, it's nearly impossible with his busy schedule. If he gets behind 1 hour of eating, it can really set him back. So what I want to make sure that we do is we have those meals 3 to 5 hours between training, right? So that training window gap 3 to 5 hours, we have a meal on both sides. But during that time, if you train for a while, 90 minutes, this is a time that doesn't necessarily matter that you're having carbs and protein during the session, but it's just a convenient time to drink some calories and get some extra in. So this might be the person where we're putting in animal meal and having them drink that as just additional meal while they train. My fifth scenario is the 2-session-a-day lifter. Now, this might be someone that loves to train, or they're just the overachiever, and maybe they have a morning push session that they do. They train chest, they go back in the evening, they hit biceps and calves. So maybe they have just short windows where they can train. Maybe they do a little bit on their lunch break, and then they do the rest in the evening. In this scenario, we still want to make sure that we have a meal on both sides of that training window to make sure you're not going into a session glycogen depleted where it's going to limit your training performance in that next session. So one of those absolutely could be a liquid meal, because again, to eat a meal on both sides of 2 different sessions, that's already might be sinking in a lot of time. So we might have to structure it to where maybe after their AM session, they have a liquid meal, or maybe that's their solid meal. Then moving into their PM session, we do a liquid meal before and then a solid meal right after. So this is when liquid meals can be really important to make sure we are rapidly replenishing glycogen, because now it's no longer going to be a 24-hour period that we have to before the next training session. It's even shorter, right? We might be training in the next 6 hours. So we want to make sure you're completely glycogen replenished. That's when faster digesting carbohydrates, we could take advantage of that increased glycogen resynthesis post-training. So that's why I would say, like in your AM session, have a liquid shake that's post-workout. That way you can get that process and have those carbohydrates uptaked. So nutrient timing, it can matter, but for some people, it doesn't matter. But try these tips if you are the 9-to-5 worker, you have a hard time structuring your meals throughout the day or knowing when you should be eating and how much you should be doing in that regard. If you have questions, leave them down below and I'm happy to answer them for you.